Hello.
Hello, guys. Welcome back once again to the Magentlemen podcast. If you're here for the sixth time, we
Fifth.
love. Ah, yes, we did record an episode that will go unreleased. It it had we had some secret top secret classified information in that podcast that we cannot release, so we had to self censor,
Yeah,
right?
we will release it one day.
We will release it when it is safe,
Yes,
when the
absolutely.
information has been declassified.
Yes. And if we get enough likes on this video, who knows? Maybe it'll be, if I get like 50 likes, I guess probably we'll have to release it, right?
No, 51 at least.
Okay. You heard him, people. Smash that like button. And just so you know, the topic today is what is the topic? Is
How to become a Magento developer.
oh, okay. I thought it was gonna be our origin stories. How
Well,
did we
yeah.
become?
Well, I think that should definitely be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
How we think people should become, like what route people should go in becoming a Magento developer, and whether the route we took was the best route. I know my route was pretty painful, so I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. And of course I took the best route. Definitely.
So I guess, can you tell us what route that was?
Well, I mean, back in the day when I started doing web development, um, tables in because I'm a front end web developer, um, tables had kind of started to become passe for doing layout. So we were just transitioning from table layouts to more CSS and that kind of layout. So you basically, my first jobs were like you needed to know HTML, CSS, and maybe a little bit of JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
From there, it progressed to the point where I had learned some PHP so that I could work on platforms like WordPress, and especially I like Drupal.
PHP, that's not front end.
Right? No, I mean I said a little bit. You got to know a little bit. Yeah, um, variables and maybe functions, just little stuff like template language, Smarty or whatever, um, for the front end dev. And yeah, I mean, I got in pretty in deep into the Drupal community. So I was
Mm-hmm.
doing like Drupal has a lot of events and stuff. You go and like they do camps and all this cool stuff, and there's a lot of learning material. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean Drupal. I loved Drupal for a long time, and then eventually I ended up at a company. I got a job where they had several Magento stores. I was their front end developer for a Magento shop. It was Magento 1, so it wasn't like this really kind of harsh difference between Drupal and Magento 1. It was like a PHP stack, and it had CSS and JavaScript involved in it.
Yeah.
So, and HTML was in there. There were some differences, but I picked them up along the way. And I worked there for probably 2 years. And what was crazy is that company, I guess there was like a partnership at the top. It was like owned by two people. And the
Mm-hmm.
guy, one of the partners who ran the warehouse, just decided he was going to stop being partners with the other guy.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So basically,
That's
we had to shut down the main website
uh
and the revenue streams stopped. I think the owner had quite a bit of money or something. So the business continued for a while, but I decided to leave, obviously. Um,
oh
and
man, you traitor.
no, it was a good thing. I mean, they didn't want to have to fire people, but they
Oh, so
also
you
like couldn't keep people on forever, right?
yeah, yeah.
So,
So you
I
fired
mean,
yourself.
yeah, and that was about right about the time when Magento 2 had come out. So I had found a job at an agency where obviously they had a bunch of Magento 1 clients, which I was well qualified to help with. And
Hmm.
really, the way agencies, or that agency at least, worked was I was going to be their kind of on-site person, and then they had several teams in the Ukraine who were actually doing kind of more of the work. I was more of like estimating and overseeing and planning tickets and kind of doing code review and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that was that. And what was crazy is that when I first started at that company, they sat me down in front of the newly released Magento 2 training material that was free until like the end of the year or something, because it had just came out and they wanted people to get
Yeah.
onboarded. And I looked at all that training material, which was cool. I was glad to have it, but it was for like version 2.1, and the current version was like um, 2 point whatever something else, and all the directory structures had changed. So a lot of the material didn't do me much good because it was quite a bit different than the exact release I was looking at. But that's kind of going to be one of my things during this whole video is just dive in, just power ahead. Um, you will hit walls for sure. It's a steep learning curve, but I
Yes,
mean,
for
that's
sure.
that's the name of the game, and that's basically my origin story. That's how I became this beastly mutant Magento 2 developer that you see
So,
before you.
so you're not going to tell us about how you struggled to be, that the struggling starts when you get into the Magento 2 space. And I think that's where people want to hear the most, right? How do you overcome that learning curve? Can you share a little bit more? You left the juicy part out.
Well, I'm not
Like,
sure. Maybe you can give me an example. Teach me how to struggle. What do you?
well, I mean, I was never exposed to Magento 1 when I came when I got into the Magento space. I was a fresh graduate, right? So still, I mean, like it would have been difficult to like just transition to software development, like professional software development in general, right? Coming straight out of college. But then I ended up getting an internship um, to work on a Magento site. Never heard about Magento before. I did some PHP work in college, right? Just like vanilla PHP, right? Maybe a Bootstrap front end, or maybe I write some custom CSS, some JavaScript, maybe some jQuery to do some stuff, but never worked with an actual framework. So then I come into Magento and like there's XML, and I'm like, what the hell is this XML for?
Definitely part of the struggle. The XML.
I'm like, what the hell is this XML stuff here for? And then I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking, yeah, where do I write my SQL queries? How do I connect to the database? So for the longest part, the shock was just like, well, um, I can't just go into this and find code and figure out how it works and change it.
It's not
Like,
WordPress,
like yeah,
right?
Magento has all these conventions that you have to follow, or just horrible things happen. Like you can't go into the vendor directory and just do whatever you want to do, right? So I don't know. Like for a really long time, I was just so lost in terms of like how do I get things to work? Like I wasn't used to having to follow so many conventions of like, oh, okay, if I want to override something, I need to put it in a specific directory. The problem was at my internship, I kind of just got thrusted into being the lead developer very quickly. There was like no it wasn't an actual internship. I was just being paid as an intern, but like in reality I was like running the site from like almost day one. We had like one offshore person. We had one offshore person that got phased out pretty quickly after I joined. He wasn't much help to me, different time zones, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, the first thing I did was, okay, I'm like, all I have to do is read this documentation, right? It's just
Ah,
documentation, right?
right. This is the instruction manual. I'm gonna build the desk, right?
Right? It's
Yes.
just like, I mean, what? Oh, okay, I'll just read some documentation and I'll figure this out. And yeah, Magento docs. Now I can read them and
They're
navigate.
pretty good now, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't
Oh, you
think
mean
that they're,
just
yeah, I don't think they met, like, they're definitely better. I would say that. But I'm saying, let's say I started today, like net with zero Magento 2 experience, and I looked at the docs. I think I would still be super confused versus if I picked up like a framework like Django. Um, and the difference is that um, I played around with Django and built a few projects with Django, but you kind of start off with a minimum amount of files, like a small amount of files, and you build out the application. Versus Magento, like out of the box, you have thousands of files, right? Which is good in some case, in some, like from a admin or a merchant perspective, right? Because it's like super out of the box. But then from a developer standpoint, if you're not used to that amount of files and and you're not familiar with the folder structure, it just looks like super complicated. Because like now I understand the concept between, okay, I have my code directory and I have my design directory. All of the code that I actually touch as a developer primarily lives in those two, right?
yeah.
Lives in
And I
lives
mean like that type of a concept would be like to me would have been natural coming from Drupal, right? Because it's the same thing.
Well, for me, I was just like, it just looked like a whole bunch of files.
Yes, I hear you. And I mean, that's part of like that's kind of my thing too, is that like depending on how how much experience you have making websites, because there's things in there like Composer, and there's things
Yeah,
in there like you just said, like kind of having a core and then extending that core and never touching
exactly,
core, like just these
exactly.
concepts that um, I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure it does say that in the doc somewhere, but there's kind of like super concepts involved. And that for me was one of the big struggles was when I first started on Magento 2 anyway. I couldn't just use XAMPP or WAMP or whatever anymore, which I
Oh,
had been doing for a long time. Like I had to have like a really well tuned local environment or else Magento 2 just wouldn't run. Like it had certain
uh,
specifications, right? So not only was I learning this new platform, but I was learning Docker basically. And I kind of would get confused between like, especially since I'm running in developer mode, right? And I didn't have like a mental model of like, okay, so it's creating symlinks and those symlinks are pointing back to here. So if I edit here, then it's going to update over there. Like I didn't know all that was going on. And then also sometimes Docker would just come out of sync, right? So I
yeah,
had these two different things and you could just blow days getting frustrated, like not knowing is it Magento 2 that I'm not getting or understanding, or is it Docker, or is it
yeah,
both at the same time? And you're just trying to
yeah.
do this one little thing from the tutorial, and it's just like you can't freaking make it do that thing.
Oh man, you don't know. So when I started my internship, I didn't have a local environment, right? Um, so and I didn't have like a good tutorial. I tried to follow a few tutorials online, but I would always run into issues, right? I would get XAMPP or LAMP set up. And what would happen was maybe I didn't have the proper permissions, so my CSS or my static files wouldn't be working right. Maybe images wouldn't show or CSS wouldn't be working because of some misconfiguration in Apache, or the file permissions were wrong, or every time I ran setup static content deploy, the file system would permissions would revert back, or sometimes I would get this redirection error. So just setting up my local with no help and just like tutorials online was a huge hurdle for me. Like it took me a really long time because, and again, I mean, this might be unique to me. I and I may be biased, right? Because I came out of college, went directly into Magento. I didn't get exposure to any like other enterprise level framework. So I had that against me, but I think Magento, like, is setting up Magento is just so much more complicated than setting up other applications. So that makes getting your local development up so you can start playing around with it, like a huge feat.
Yeah,
Like,
that was
you wanted to add something?
well. I mean, I think you're saying it was like a disadvantage that you came out of, or did you say advantage?
No. So I'm not saying it was. I'm not necessarily saying it was an advantage or disadvantage.
Just
Maybe
that.
maybe it was.
Well, either way,
I'm
either
saying
way.
that Magento is difficult in general,
Yeah,
right? So obviously, I was at some disadvantage coming fresh out of college, but I think anyone just if you were just thrown into Magento with zero guidance, you would struggle. You
yeah,
would
and
struggle to get your local up and running.
I think absolutely. And but like, so let's say, because I guess there are from a front end developer perspective, I can really only speak from that perspective. But like, um, the way Magento 2 works on the front end, obviously, if you have, like I did, a bunch of experience of web development before getting to Magento 2, that's an advantage because you kind of understand certain things, or at least when you look at the way Magento 2 is working, you can compare it and contrast and say, oh, like this is different, or that's how this works, but the old one used to work this way, or like, because at the time when I got into Magento 2, another thing I was pretty deep into playing with was Angular. So that is a front end framework, you could say. I think they call it I think they actually call it a framework. But it's all uh, it's like built for single page apps, like headless apps that you would connect to like Laravel or Cake PHP or some backend Java. Doesn't matter, right? Like it could be .NET backend. Um, and that, I think a lot of front end developers, um, at the time that Magento 2 came out, will have been doing that kind of single page app. It's either React or Vue or something. Maybe they started with Backbone, and now they went through the knockout days, and now they've landed on Angular or React. But then it's kind of like you look at Magento 2, you go, oh, okay, knockouts in here, cool. Like I used that whatever years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really like you mentioned, one of the things that's kind of mind blowing is the XML setup. Like you get
Ooh,
it, it's useful, powerful in a certain way, but it's
yeah.
also really kind of like,
What the
whoa.
hell is this? I'm just like, how did configurations in the XML, how do they end up in the PHP? I
Well, I could tell you. Basically, in M1, big complaint of everybody, I guess. Well, maybe not everybody, but some people felt like M1 was spaghetti, right? Like, I don't know if you've looked much into what WordPress does. It's very procedural. Um, so they introduced the object manager, right? And they introduced this XML paradigm. It was a little bit of that XML stuff was there in M1, but they really beefed it up. And a good way to think of it is that the stack went from sort of being like spaghetti. Not I never agreed with that, but now you can think of it as like this pancake, and
Yeah,
the pancake is kind of all these separations of concern and all these like there's those I think you said 12
design patterns.
design patterns like this.
Yeah.
And I always kind of felt that about Magento that because I guess okay, so for me, from my experience with like Drupal, or even I've worked with Laravel a little bit. Um, the I almost felt like Magento was like a genius, some computer scientist person came up with like this is how a website should work, and they built it, and it's almost like they built like Java with PHP, because it's this pre-compiling and all this stuff that, I mean, to me as a Drupal developer, I know Drupal pretty well, and it's all just super foreign. Like I had never seen anything like that. So uh, and obviously I'm not, like I said, I'm not qualified as like a back end person to comment on the architecture or if it's good or bad. I just know to me it was foreign.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say I I would yeah, I wouldn't say that the architecture is bad. I mean, I definitely appreciate it a lot more now that I understand how it works, and why modularity is such a concern, the service contracts and all of that. And I had being coming from the Java space, I had some experience with Spring, um, which is a Java framework, and they do use XML. I don't think not as in Spring, but I don't believe it's as heavily used as in Magento.
Well, I
And
mean, you
obviously,
wouldn't use it to define your like layouts, would you?
yeah, I don't think it's used to define layouts.
No. That's
Yeah.
I mean, it might
um,
be, but that would, again, it would be different than most.
yeah. I mean, I think the consensus on the internet um, is because when during my internship, I spent a lot of time Googling, I hate Magento 2. Magento 2 sucks. How to be better at Magento 2. You know what the most frustrating part was? I was like, okay, I'll just find a tutorial. And there were no tutorials.
Because
so,
it was brand new, right?
so I was just like, oh man, I'm gonna get out of this Magento 2 thing and go, work on Java like I intended to. I thought I would be writing Java or Python code in one of the relevant frameworks, etc. That's not what happened.
I
so
mean, dude, I to a certain degree I agree. Magento is difficult, and you kind of have to, from my perspective, hold your nose a bit while you work on it, just because of some of the technology choices. Um, because you kind of like, as a front developer, you're wanting to use like Webpack and um, React or Vue, just and having like CI CD and a normal deployment flow where it's like, I don't know, just you kind of have that inside of you. You really want a more modern thing, but then at the same time, I am encouraging people to work on Magento 2. Why? Because you can make a good living doing it. And honestly, over the next few years as a front end developer, it's all going to go headless anyway. So you're going to have those nice apps and deployment and everything the way you want it. And hopefully you'll be making some good bucks along the way. It's a huge platform that tons of enterprise companies use, with tons of demand. I get constant hit up from recruiters.
Yeah, I can definitely say that is one of the reasons. One, that, I started to get more comfortable with the platform. I got more immersed in the community, but also the pay is relatively higher than, a Java developer
Yeah,
job,
because of
right?
demand and nobody wants to work on it, I guess. I mean, it's the learning curve is atrocious, and
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
to be an
yeah.
absolute beast, savage developer to become a Magento 2.
Yeah, you have to be willing to, like, go through the trenches, man. That was my, for the longest, I forget who I reached out to. Uh, the guy from JetRails.
JetBrains,
No. JetRails.
JetRails.
Yeah, I forget his name, and I don't want to look it
I've
up.
never even heard of it. What is JetRails?
It's you know what? I'm not really sure what they do, but I know they have some association with Magento.
Okay.
But yeah, for a long while, I reached out to, I think he's the director of partnerships or something at JetRails. Just all the Magento evangelists, just trying to find people that could be of some help to me to, like, guide me, because I felt like really lost.
Yeah.
But I must say, I think with the Magento docs, I think the first of all, I think I was trying to consume, like, when I started to build momentum and really start to get better at Magento, when I said to myself, okay, I'm just gonna slow the pace down. I'm a backend developer. That was my other problem, right? I graduated, um, you know, I wrote mostly like backend languages, PHP, Java, Python, that type of thing, right? So I get this internship, and now I'm in a full stack role.
Bum, bum, bum.
So yeah. So I had some experience with JavaScript, some experience with jQuery, but Knockout JS was just like you know Chinese,
Yeah.
even though I probably understand more Chinese than I like at that point, because I took 2 semesters of Chinese in college, but that's
Wow.
a story for another
I
time.
think you mean Mandarin.
Correct.
Ah!
Correct. Mandarin, because there are different. Mandarin is the official language, but then there's like Cantonese and other versions
You're making me hungry.
that are specific to certain regions.
I love Chinese food.
Okay.
Is that, yeah, you said Cantonese. It's like, I think that's, I don't know, one of my favorite kinds of Chinese food.
You're, I don't think Cantonese is okay. Okay. I don't know. I don't eat Chinese food much, but Cantonese is a type of Chinese food.
I think so. Is it not? Do I have to?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I take it back.
We are gonna get some hate on this. But so yeah, I think my approach to reading the docs was a bit, I was just trying to rush through. I was trying to rush through the docs, and then I kind of, when I realized there weren't that many good resources out there, and that Magento U costs an arm and a leg, I just kind of, started to try to slow things down and just approach one problem at a time, try to find a tutorial that's as close to the issue as possible, and consult the Magento docs, but just kind of really go through it slowly and try to understand the concepts. Dependency injection, for example, was a design pattern that I was not um, familiar with.
Don't call me, I'll call you. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, dependency injection. I just kind of like was online friend like searching a lot, just trying to figure out what are the absolute necessary, what are the concepts that I need to absolutely understand to get to make some progress and gain some momentum to get my head wrapped around this thing. Because I had like one mistake I made was kind of at some point making the decision that I had to become like an expert at PHP and an expert at XML and learn the history of every single technology in Magento before I could like become, before I could move forward. And then it was just taking so long because like PHP is its own beast, XML is its own beast, and then then you have all the JavaScript, right? And it's like, there was this, like I was saying, I made the mistake of thinking I had to be an expert in all of these technologies before I can move forward. Slowly but surely, I just came to realize, okay, I need to understand the framework. I know enough PHP to get my job done. I will master all the technologies and get better at them, overall versus trying to, understand every single thing about each individual technology. So please don't see the XML, like if you're starting Magento 2 today, don't see XML and say, oh my God, I have no idea how XML works. And now you're learning, you know, you're going into the history of XML and how all the nodes work and the different versions and stuff like that. And before you know it, you're an XML expert, but
Yeah.
you have made no progress in terms of becoming a Magento 2 developer. Don't make that mistake. I definitely made that mistake.
You learn all about Professor XML,
No, I had a whole
the
book.
inventor.
I had a whole book specifically because I was like, man, I need to understand every single thing about XML because unless I do that, I won't be able to truly, be a Magento 2 developer, which was incorrect. Obviously, the better you understand each underlying technology, the better you are as an overall software developer, but it's definitely not true that you need to be an expert, right?
Right. And I mean, that was kind of one of my things is that, like, definitely you don't need to be an expert at um, even HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to be a Magento 2 developer. But you do, like you were saying, have to have the fundamentals down packed, or else you will run into, which it kind of sounds like you probably ran into this a little bit, the problem of trying to learn everything at once. And you
Yeah.
kind of don't know, well, is it PHP that I'm struggling with right now, or is it the Magento implementation of PHP, or is
Yeah.
it both? And you don't have that place where you can sit firmly and say, like, I get this. I don't know why it's not doing that. You know.
Yeah.
By the way,
The
Cantonese food is totally a real thing. Go on. I looked it up.
Okay. I did not know that, so
Learn something
thank
every
you.
day. Yeah.
um, but yeah, understanding the different layers, understanding like for on the front end side, the fallback mechanism, understanding um, how to extend things. I think um, in a way, you, you kind of just have to, like I said, tackle each problem as it comes, and with each problem you solve, you understand the framework a little bit better. And while tackling a problem, you realize, well, I don't understand this particular thing about how this particular thing's being rendered in the front end. So maybe I should do a little bit of research more on how knockout works, right? Or how the layout works, right? And I'll say this about the Magento docs: they're good at dividing things into what is most relevant to a particular problem, right? You can go to the Magento docs and just be stuck on the front end developer like stuff, right? And all the back end stuff that's not relevant to you, like I don't know, like uh, code generation and compilation and plugins and stuff like that. Like you can completely ignore that and just learn about, how layouts work, how to remove stuff from a layout, what are blocks and containers and stuff like that, and how all of those go into creating a page. And then you have the JavaScript area where you can focus on UI components and initialization of JavaScript and blah, blah, blah. So I would say in that regard, the documentation is compartmentalized well enough so that if you run into a particular issue, you're not bogged down by too much information, because you can just say, okay, this is a front end issue. I'm gonna look at the front end portion of the documentation. Do you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think though any developer in M2 kind of has to realize that it is or not realize, but kind of grok and have the mental model of that Magento 2 is like a three-legged stool, right? You have your code base, your database, and the CLI. And those three things are what make up the whole thing. And like we kind of touched on is first go through the gauntlet of installing your local and then do
Yeah.
yourself a favor. Tear it all down and do it again.
Yeah.
Just rip out every beautiful thing you just built and do it all over again. Because
Yeah.
that second time, if you can go through the process and make it happen quickly, or at least you feel more like you understand it better that second time, then you really made some good progress. And then you're gonna have to, doesn't matter if you're front or back end, you're gonna have to touch the database. So
Yeah.
install SQL Pro or whatever, however are gonna deal with some SQL, and then learn some CLI commands. You got to
Yeah.
know that stuff. I mean, that you don't have to know it, but it's super helpful.
Yeah, I don't think you can get away with not knowing the CLI commands if you're a
Oh, that's
Magento developer, right? Whether front end or back end, right? And I mean, like there's this concept of the middle end developer that handles JavaScript. I have never seen one. Right, I only see front end and back end developers. I don't see any. I've never met a developer that just specializes in the JavaScript portion, right, of Magento, right, which is the kind of the glue between the front end and the back end.
no. I mean
Um,
that type of developer um, would be a front end developer. That's probably what their title would be, but they wouldn't want to do like layout stuff.
like yeah,
They wouldn't
they
want to be making your CSS and stuff for you. They want to work on JavaScript.
yeah. I mean, I do feel like that a lot of that work, at least in my experience, um, ends up falling back on the back end uh, developers, right? Because a lot of times you do go into a team where the front end devs are more focused on the UI, specifically the CSS and layout portions of it, right?
Yeah.
And you have if you didn't know JavaScript before, if you want to be a backend developer in Magento 2, you're gonna have to pick up some JavaScript, right? Um, at minimum, understand how Knockout works in Magento and what required JS works and how components are loaded and all of that stuff,
Well,
right?
and that's the thing too, is like if you want to be a front end developer in Magento 2, you're gonna have to understand how the back end works to an extent.
Because
Like,
of the PHTML files, right?
yeah, and I mean, well, not only that, but like think of like the mini cart, right? That is a highly integrated thing. So if any work is going to be done on that, like you want to add some new thing to it or whatever, you're going to need to know the front and the back end, basically. Um,
Yeah, like how requests are sent to the server, where it is, how to get the data into local storage, for it to be accessible to the front end, how sections work, because the mini cart works just like the account section, right? You have sections.xml that grabs data from the back end. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is very much one of those stacks.
tightly
Um,
coupled.
yeah, it's. I don't know if I would use that word.
Tightly coupled.
Tightly coupled. Um, hmm. I no, I don't think that. I don't think. Okay, we'll let that one slide. But yes, you very much have to know. You can't just live in your own world, right? You kind of, if you're building a module, which you might think, oh, okay, the back end developers build modules and front end developers work in the theme. But no, your module will override some front end components, right? It'll make some changes on the front end and you can override CSS and blocks and stuff like that in a module, right? So then it's like, at what point are you? At what point is the backend developer doing doing some front end work also, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think like depending on, like you said, um, the expertise of the people on the team, I could definitely see JavaScripty tasks ending up in the back end. Um, but like, if you have somebody strong with JavaScript, those tasks could happen quicker or in a better way than probably back end devs could come up with quickly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the other thing
I
is
agree.
that soon I think we're going to have quite a different paradigm where literally, the back end and the front end devs are kind of working together to figure out, okay, this is the data I need to expose and the endpoints for get and put requests. And we're doing GraphQL and we're doing, I mean, it won't be all GraphQL. There's still going to be some REST involved, but it really will be a separation of concerns once it's headless. Um, the front end devs can do
Yeah,
whatever they want. They can just tell back
whatever they
end,
want.
hey, like we need this data,
Yeah,
basically.
just give me the endpoints. Make sure the data is available here so I can do whatever I want. Right now, it's more of like, well, what are you gonna put in the block? Um, right? And in the PHTML file so I can style appropriately. It's kind of like there is no real demarcation point. There's a lot of like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Okay, you want to do this here? Okay, I'll do that over there. So
Tightly coupled.
tightly coupled. I think some the computer science person that you referenced that built this Magento. um,
He would be offended.
yeah, he was gonna be like, I don't know what if tightly coupled means what you're trying to make it mean.
Well, and then like in the new like headless, it's like decoupled, right?
Yes.
We wouldn't have kind of like, I mean, you could imagine, and I like what I was trying to say too is that front end back end are still gonna have to work really closely together and kind of communicate about the data and the endpoints and how the requests are going to go back and forth. But there really won't be this need anymore for the backend devs to be messing with JavaScript if they don't want to.
Yeah,
And especially the front end devs aren't going to have to, you know, kind of figure out this XML, PHTML,
exactly.
knockout setup and kind of make it work. And oh, by the way, backend, I can't figure out how to get this data presented. You know, like where is it? How do I
And
pull it out of the stack or whatever?
and you won't have backend devs overriding layouts to cause right
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a brave new
overriding
world.
overriding layouts in their fancy new module,
Yeah.
causing front end issues like I did at one time.
Hey, man. Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was funny.
um, so yeah, I mean, thankfully, there are more resources now, right?
Yeah.
Right. Um, Magento U was free for a little while, right? I wish it was, well, at least the on-demand courses were free for a little while. I don't know if I'm much of a fan, but I think if I got those earlier on, it might have helped. Might have still been super confused, but it might have helped a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
they were a little bit helpful to me.
yeah. And then you told me about Mage TV,
Mage2.tv.
Mage2.tv, pretty useful tool. Um, and well, what else? Then and there's M Academy, um, which a course that I recently bought. I think it's pretty good. It touches on some. It touches. It's a beginner course, so anyone wanting to jump into the Magento space, I think that's a good place to start. Definitely not as expensive as Magento U. Sorry, Adobe, if I'm um, if you guys don't like what I'm saying, but
They don't watch this.
M Academy is a lot cheaper, and I think it's pretty comparable in terms of quality, maybe a little bit better than what you would get from the Magento U courses. Um,
Don't forget about the Max Bronco.
yes, Max Pronko has a YouTube channel where he covers some pretty cool topics.
Plus, he has his own course for sale. That's kind of like M Academy.
Yeah, Alan Storm, uh, pretty good too.
What
Uh,
does he have? I thought he doesn't do Magento anymore or something.
well, I mean, his old stuff helps.
Yeah.
If you really want to understand, if you really want to dig into how the back end of Magento works, check out Alan
Oh
Storm.
yeah,
He goes
definitely.
into really, really, really deep, detail. He understands, how Magento works.
Yeah, he was really big during Magento 1 days. Like he was the big uh, person that helped you understand everything. I don't know. Does he continue to release
I
stuff?
don't, I don't know. I don't keep up with his blog or his site. I mean, I do reference certain things. Um,
Let's take a.
I do reference his site for certain things when I need to refresh on some concepts. But I think there's still a gap, right, in terms of on at least on the back end, in terms like specifically touching the subject of EAV. Um, and then I would like to see someone like really talk about Magento's database structure and like give a rundown of like, if you're looking for this data, look in this table.
Core config data.
Yeah, I mean, core config data.
That's where all the cool stuff is.
Yeah, but I mean, you might want to, look at other tables too.
No, no. Take it from a front end developer. Stick to core config.
Core config data. Yeah. So yeah, EAV is one to wrap your head around. If you're new to Magento, that's not unique to Magento, but if it's a thing in Magento, and if you're just used to like flat tables and you're looking at the database, uh, looking to see, columns just named regularly, yeah, you're in for a surprise.
So, yeah, it looks like Alan Storm, the last thing he released on his website is January 27th, 2020. So that's not too bad, but I don't see that it has much to do with Magento 2. He has a lot of good information, but I think it might be older. So almost all of his other posts are like 2018, 2017.
Yeah, I like he covers concepts of like he covers things like, I mean, I reference his blog for more of the complex things that are still a part of Magento,
Awesome.
like
Yeah,
plugins
I mean,
and
this list is
how preferences work and
amazing.
UI components. So definitely older material. I think some of it is still relevant though.
Are you using his Pestle thing?
No, I have no idea what that
He
is.
built some tool. I guess it's like
Sorry, Alan.
it's all good.
I did see that one time, but I was like, this doesn't look like it's gonna help me with Magento at all, so I'm just gonna leave it alone.
Ah,
I mean,
yeah. And then there's
go ahead.
oh no, you're good.
Front end people you want to point out that are good teaching the front end concept, uh, the front end portions of Magento. You want to drop any names or resources?
No. I mean,
I mean,
you already did. You talked about the only people that exist.
I mean, so I kind of went in detail, like how I learned the back end stuff,
Yeah.
right? You want to touch a little bit more on how you learned the front end portion, or
Yeah. I mean, so okay. The thing about it is like, let's say you're coming out of college or you're coming out of boot camp, and you just kind of have a more normal front end development stack, right? Or a lot of times, what you learn in those camps and college is just the fundamental technology. So you don't necessarily have a stack. A lot of times, you'll learn React or Angular Review at this point, but um, so you'll know your JavaScript really well, or maybe some CSS and HTML definitely. And it's just all about putting that together and learning the way that Magento does it. The big thing is going to be figuring out deployment modes, getting your local installed. Like you want to know about those symlinks, and I used to always get really confused, but I would change from development to production mode to check something or something like that. Or I'd be in developer mode and then I would do static content deploy, and that was like not right. And then you have to get rid of all those files to make them all appear again. So just playing with that and making sure that you can do the work you're trying to do, because what did happen for me a lot of times when I was learning Magento 2 is there would be some simple task, and just to get to the point where I could do the task was the battle. You would just be like, what is this platform doing? Why can't I just change
Go to
that
where the
text or
yeah, yeah,
so it's the battle before the thing that you're trying to do. So if you can at least get yourself to the point where it's like I know what I need to do, I can see where it needs to be changed, then you can go and kind of figure out the way through Magento 2 of like, oh, okay, this is where the symlink is. Let me go check. Is the symlink there? Is it pointing? Oh, it's a real file. Let me delete it. Let me switch my mode. Let me make sure that, or you know what? Let me just edit this exact file. Does it update? You know, let's say it's in pub, whatever.
yeah.
And then you're going to have to learn quite a bit about less. You know, less the way Magento implements less. It has its own media queries. For me, it uses way too many variables and like um, stuff like that, where it's like trying to build this whole platform, right? Where every color and every font and everything that you could possibly imagine is a variable. And then they store all these variables in different files. So you kind of just have to, for me, I hold my nose and go, ugh, I don't code that way normally. I know it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like, again, it's like the computer science person who goes like, well, actually, the way it should be is like this. And then it's like, well, fine. Like, I get that what you're doing makes sense, like, in a logical, theoretical, like in a vacuum, that's better because if you ever change that color, it's going to change everywhere else. But also, I have find and replace. Like, if I need to change black, I could just change it to a different color and whatever. Like, but I'm like, I don't want to bag on the way Magento is. I'm just saying you're going to have to get used to a very, um, it's almost like if you've ever heard of like atomic CSS, where they, every little piece that could be pulled apart and stuck somewhere else is, so that when you're editing the thing in front of you, most likely stuff that you need to actually change is in 4 other files.
Oh, yes. Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
I mean, it's never like you don't just go here and change the thing you need to change. No, no, no. They abstracted that away to help you.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yes.
great. Okay.
Yeah, help me.
Thank you so much for helping me.
Help make my job more difficult because now there's like 10 plugins, each in a just in a different place, and I need to go find the order that each plugin is running, right? And there's like a million preferences for the same class, so I don't like this class that I'm looking at is not the one that's going to be used. It's like this other one in this other module. Man, from like I just remember being so confused, so confused because I'm like, why are there so many files?
I think there's like close to 40,000 in the code base. That doesn't include what gets added by composer.
Yeah, yeah,
I think. I've heard
I
that.
think it's definitely in the tens of thousands. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Again,
And
though, I do recommend becoming a Magento developer. I
it
think it's
is
cool.
it is definitely worth it, despite the trauma and the PTSD.
Yeah, just think back to high school. Don't you want to be cool and different? You know, you don't want to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like the
yeah.
rest of these
Exactly.
people. Set yourself apart. Be a Magento 2 developer.
Exactly. The benefit is that you, at least right now, we're very hot. Like everyone, like recruiters reach out to me all the time, and they're always offering me more money than I currently make. But I like to, I can't just jump ship every second, even if,
Jump
you
ship,
know.
dude. You get to the point like me where like they hit me up and I'm like, oh well, this is how much I make, and then they all just scurry away because they can't
Oh,
possibly match that.
oh, well, I need to get on your level.
I get up here, man.
Give me a few more years.
Yeah.
um, I, anything else you wanted to touch? I think we went all over the place, but
No. I mean, like I think that's a good kind of place to end it. If you're looking for an interesting technology, it's not necessarily the latest and greatest thing. For me, I will tell you again, you'll probably have to hold your nose quite a bit working in the stack. If you're experienced with other stacks or technologies, you're going to have a lot of learning curve, or if you're not experienced with them. But in the end, as a career, I think it's worth it. It is going in, especially as a front developer, the right direction to where it will be a more modern stack soon, within the next 5 years for sure. Nobody's going to be building like new Magento 2 stores that have the old Magento 2 front end on them. We probably will be supporting that for a while, maybe up to 10 years or whatever. But
Well, we're still supporting, not we, as in me, because I've never touched M1, but the community is still supporting M1.
yeah, which I don't mind. I mean, I think M1's fine. I'm surprised they ended it like that. They just really wanted everybody to switch over, or they just don't
Yeah.
want to support it. I guess I don't know.
Well, they're trying to move on to bigger and better things. But I think for merchants, it's like a cost thing, and then like it's painful to migrate. You know, and just migrating from upgrading from one you know Magento
It's
version to another can be
yeah,
excruciating.
but M1 to M2 is not. It's not like an upgrade. It's a replatform. It's a
Yeah.
You might as well be going to Shopify or BigCommerce or
No, do not go to Shopify or
yeah.
BigCommerce.
I mean, it has its limitations. That's the
Stay.
beauty. I will say that too. The beauty of Magento is there's no limitations. You can do anything.
Yes, you can fly. Anything with Magento on your side. So just to reiterate what Steve was saying, I mean, it was tough getting to this point, but I'm happy I stuck it through. I mean, I tried to jump ship to go to like Django so many times, but then I ended up just sticking around, and now I think it's Magento is an acquired taste. You have to be a certain individual. I'm just kidding. I you want to end it here, Steve?
Let's end it here. Smash that like button if you're still watching. Click subscribe.
Yeah, do what Steve T said.
Build a
We,
Magento store. Set up your local host. Switch modes.
if you have any, if you're a Magento noob out there and you have any questions, feel free to email us at the email addresses we haven't provided yet. Well, email me. I don't know about Steve because he's super busy.
No, you can email me. I thought you were going to say email Max Bronco or Mark Shest.
Well, definitely email those guys. Everyone that I have reached out to in the past has responded.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of like nobody really developing on this platform is that you could just reach out to people and they're like, oh yeah, hey, blah blah blah. I guess Drupal community was like that to a certain extent, but the people that were popular in the Drupal community would get hit up a lot, so they couldn't possibly respond to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in our community, it's a little smaller. Like even the biggest names, if you email them, you get hit back. I have every time.
Yeah. I can definitely say that is not an issue. It's a tightly knit community. Um, so join.
Peace
So
out.
peace.